I watched the store eat Elena long before she realized she was being digested. It didn't happen all at once. It happened in quiet, agonizing increments of $14.50 an hour. By her third year at Martin, Maine, Elena wasn't a person anymore. She was just an asset. A biological gear spinning in a machine that traded her youth for plastic pricing tags. She wanted to quit every single morning, but she couldn't. Because when you owe the Matrix money, walking away feels like jumping out of a moving plane without a parachute. She thought the physical exhaustion was finally making her hallucinate. The first time she saw it was hiding right behind the winter clearance rack. It didn't have a face, just a terrifying countdown where its heart should have been. It didn't move toward her. It just stood there, watching her, ticking, a sound like metal teeth grinding together. It didn't want her flesh. It wanted her to look at what she was doing with her life. It stood in the shadows of the empty store, its hollow chest flashing a single number like a digital curse. $11.42. Her exact, pathetic bank balance. When she finally escaped to her car, her survival instinct kicked in, but it was completely broken. To stop the panic from choking her, she did what the consumer system trained her to do. She opened her phone and spent money she hadn't earned yet, buying a temporary hit of cheap dopamine. A digital bandage for a hemorrhaging soul. She thought she left the horror back at the department store. She was dead wrong. The entity followed her home because she carried its coordinates in her own purse. Every credit card statement she refused to open was a formal invitation. Every unpaid bill was pure fuel for the monster hiding in her closet. It tracking her slow, systemic corporate suicide. And if she didn't look at the math, she was going to die behind that register. Fear does two things. It either paralyzes you, or it makes you dangerous. Elena chose to get dangerous. She looked the monster right in its empty face, opened her notebook, and whispered, "Show me." The entity didn't strike. It just began to write her reality in lines of burning red text. The monster forced her to calculate her real wage. She thought she was working for $14.50 an hour, but when you subtracted the cost of the gas to get to a store 40 minutes away, the expensive energy drinks to survive the late shift, and the takeout meals because she was too exhausted to cook, her actual take-home pay was slashed to pieces. $6.20. That was the truth. She was trading a non-renewable hour of her finite human life for the price of a cheap gallon of milk. Every time she bought comfort items to numb the pain of her shift, she was paying for the cage with pieces of the prison bars. Then came the real horror: compound interest. The entity showed her that her $4,000 credit card debt at a 24% interest rate wasn't just a number, it was a literal trapdoor. By paying only the minimums, she wasn't paying off her past, she was selling her future. She was locked into working the next 3 years of her life at the store, just to pay for things she had already thrown away. The debt was a physical chain wrapping around her waist, binding her to the concrete floors of Mart and Main. Every zombie subscription, every convenient app delivery, every little luxury she used to forget her day was a hidden tax. A tax paid directly to the machine to keep her too broke to run. The store paid her just enough to survive, and her exhaustion ensured she spent it right back into the system. That was the turning point. She looked down at her notebook and drew a box around the bleeding numbers. She realized the entity wasn't her executioner. It was her auditor. It wasn't there to terrorize her. It was there because she was terrorizing herself with bad math. To destroy the monster, she didn't need an exorcist. She needed a budget. And the moment she accepted that reality, the rough, flaking rust on the creature's body began to crack wide open. Elena didn't sleep that night. Instead, she declared total financial warfare. She went through her bank statements like a detective cleaning a bloody crime scene. She realized that every $10 streaming service she didn't use was 40 minutes of standing on a concrete floor. She canceled all of them. To defeat a parasite, you must stop feeding it your blood. That was the night the entity delivered a warning written centuries ago from the ancient Gracián Code. A rule meant for kings, but terrifyingly real for a modern retail worker. Maxim 243. Do not belong entirely to another. Elena realized she had violated this rule completely. She had rented her entire existence to a master. The system always fights back when you try to unplug. The next morning, her store manager, Mr. Vance, tried to corner her in his clinical office. He used the standard corporate playbook, psychological guilt. He told her they were short-staffed, told her she wasn't a team player, and demanded she cover a weekend double shift with that synthetic, unblinking customer service smile. In the past, Elena would have folded just to avoid conflict, but today, the math in her notebook gave her a spine. Reflected in her mind was the code: do not belong to another. Gracián taught that the moment you give a master total control over your schedule, you cease to be a human and you become corporate property. Elena looked Vance directly in his dead eyes, firmly pushed the shift log back across his desk, and calmly said, "No, my schedule is locked." Vance didn't know how to handle an employee who couldn't be manipulated by fear. By withholding her consent, Elena reclaimed the borders of her own life. She built defensive walls around her remaining cash. She started packing her own lunches, refusing to pay the $10 convenience tax to the food court every single afternoon. She replaced lifestyle creep with radical discipline. She drove right past the neon temptations of the drive-thru. Every single dollar she saved didn't sit in a passive savings account. It went straight into her highest interest credit card balance, like a heat-seeking missile. She lived on the bare essentials for 90 days, choking out her debt line by line. And as the balance dropped, the heavy, rusted chain wrapped around her waist violently snapped and shattered onto the floorboards. The terrifying rust on the monster's body peeled away completely, revealing highly polished, pristine, sterling silver clockwork underneath. Its mechanical gears were now spinning in a smooth, rhythmic, hypnotic purr, like a perfectly tuned Swiss watch. The horror was evaporating, replaced by an unsettling, beautiful truth. Now that she had mastered her survival math, the entity was changing form. It was no longer a warden keeping her in a cage. It was a guide, pointing her toward the exit. Elena was out of debt, but she wasn't out of the trap. She still had to survive 40 hours a week at Martin, Maine. She adopted a strategy from the code called the reserved self. She did her job perfectly, so Vance had no excuse to fire her, but she checked her soul at the door. She stopped giving the store her emotional energy. She kept her mind locked away in a private vault, using her internal mental processing power to map out her real freedom while she was on the clock. Every evening from 7 to 9, she entered her personal sanctuary. She didn't watch television. She didn't scroll social media to forget her day. She used those 2 hours to build a bridge out of the matrix. The silver entity stood over her shoulder, its chest displaying a strict 2-hour countdown. It forced her to realize that her 3 years in retail gave her a massive, hidden superpower. She knew exactly how retail supply lines and stockrooms suffered from bad organization. She didn't try to build a massive, revolutionary tech startup. She solved a real, painful, boring problem for small, independent boutique owners who were drowning in their own chaotic paperwork and unorganized receipts. She offered them a clean back-end system so they could focus on selling. She sent out targeted, professional pitches. She wasn't acting out of desperation anymore. She was operating with the cold precision of an auditor. She hovered over the launch of her independent freelance business. She was living a double life. By day, she was an invisible, disposable retail worker scanning items. By night, she was an operational specialist earning $40 an hour from her couch. The 9 to 6 job was no longer her identity. It was simply the subsidy funding her liberation. Within 4 months, she secured her first consistent clients. When her phone lit up with her first major independent invoice payment, the entire room shifted. The income wasn't luxury money. It was escape velocity. The silver clockwork entity underwent its final majestic transformation. A wave of brilliant, shimmering liquid gold spread across its gears, turning it into a pristine monument of polished gold filigree. The digital countdown on its chest completely vanished, replaced by an open, hollow window revealing a miniature view of a perfectly clear blue sky with radiant sunbeams pouring out. The very first month, her independent earnings matched her exact minimized cost of living. The balance of power permanently flipped. She typed out her resignation letter with a golden hand resting on her shoulder. The store didn't own her anymore. She officially owned herself. She didn't rage quit. She didn't make a scene. She walked into Vance's office and placed her elegant, typed resignation letter on his desk. She stood tall, completely at peace, casting a long shadow over his corporate furniture. Vance looked down at the paper, his face turning completely pale. His synthetic, manipulative customer service smile shattered for good. He was looking at an employee who had completely broken his spells. She was entirely out of his reach. Elena turned around and walked out of the heavy glass automatic doors of Martin, Maine, for the last time. She stepped directly forward into a blinding flood of brilliant, warm, natural afternoon sunlight. The chains were broken. She looked down at her wrist. The golden entity was gone, but in its place, its swirling golden sands had condensed into a beautiful, pristine gold watch, ticking perfectly. Her time was finally her own property. She looked up at the vast blue sky and took her first breath of true freedom. She had broken the monopoly on her soul. If you are watching this video from a retail break room, a car in a dark parking lot, or a job that is slowly evaporating your spirit, look deep inside yourself. The horror you feel every single morning isn't just stress. It is your soul screaming, because you have broken the code. You have allowed yourself to belong entirely to another entity. You are buying comfort items to survive a job you hate, paying for the cage with pieces of the prison bars. The loop will never stop unless you force it to drop. Remember the second episode of the Gracián Code. Do not belong entirely to another. Audit your real math. Starve your financial leaks. Reclaim your evenings. Stop letting corporate entities drink your finite youth for pennies. The golden way out isn't a miracle. It is mathematical discipline. Turn your terror into your strategy and take your life back. Until next time on the Gracián Code, own your time. If you like this video, please share, comment, and subscribe.